Hello and welcome to Hegemony Revealed. Today we are joined by Elizabeth Leiba. Did I say that right, Elizabeth? Did I say your last name right? Come
I'm gonna
on.
start pronouncing my name like that. I like that pronunciation actually.
Did I?
It's
Did
Leiba. It's
Leiba?
Leiba. Yeah.
Okay, I was getting real African with it, so.
Yeah, when I used to work in Hialeah, they would tell me I was pronouncing my name wrong because my name is Cuban descent. My dad's side is from Cuba, so they would say,
Uh-huh.
"Oh, you're pronouncing your name wrong." So you're
Oh,
probably pronouncing it correct. So
well, thank you for joining us today on Hegemony Reveal. And just a little bit about Elizabeth. She's a speaker, author, and college professor. She's a highly rated speaker, and she's just released a new book. Of work about workplace culture called "I'm Not Yelling: A Black Woman's Guide to Navigating the Workplace." And as a college professor with more than 20 years of experience in higher education. So we are really excited to have her on here. And three lucky people on this live will get a copy of her book for free. So please comment and uh, and let's see who's lucky. So,
yay.
and of course, we have our co-hosts, Garry Turner and Shahana, the beautiful Shahana. So, Hegemony Revealed. What do you think of that? What do you think when you hear Hegemony Revealed, Elizabeth?
Yeah, that's such a good question because I think for me, this journey on social justice and equity and for me it really was more of the history of why things were the way they were in 2020. For me as a college professor, a lot of my approach hadn't been from the perspective of DEI and percentages and what's going on in corporate America. It was more like, okay, why are people so confused about the history of America? But the
Mm,
more I started to dive into the resistance to that information, the more I started to see how there really wasn't a lot of way to really educate. I think I came to this conclusion pretty recently, maybe in the past few months, maybe in the past month or two, where I started to say, almost like what W.E.B. Du Bois said at the end of his career. He had written The Souls of Black Folk. Obviously, we know he was the first Black man to earn a PhD from Harvard University and said the pleasure, believe me, was all Harvard's. Like, he was literally a boss in every respect of the word, part of the talents and tenth, and everything that he talked about related to so many of the things that we're going through today. But at the end, it was almost like, well, I gave them all the education. I gave them everything. I gave them all the stats. I gave them a history. I told them everything that we'd done, and they still don't seem to be able to grasp. And I think really I got to that same conclusion at the end of this 3 years it's been since 2020, that it's not lack of education, it's not lack of knowledge, it's not lack of being able to explain it, it's lack of understanding of what whiteness really is and lack of the inability to let go of that, because it's very
mm,
integral to people's identity. And when you think about something that's integral to somebody's identity, but it's not real, that's really scary. And I think for me, when we think about the concept of blackness and whiteness, when we know that both of those things are really not even a reality, they're a myth and they've been created almost like it's like a movie. When you go into a movie and it's like, well, Jonathan Majors and um, Michael B. Jordan are friends, right? They're close friends in real life, but then Jonathan Majors is the villain and Michael B. Jordan is the hero, right? In Creed. We know
mm,
that's a fantasy. We know they're good friends, but they're acting. And I feel as though this is what's happening. We're all in a play that or a movie. At least
mm.
Jonathan Majors and Michael B. Jordan, they're both fine. They look good. We know that it's not real. We're rooting for Jonathan Majors, even though he's the villain. But we know that this is not real. They're really actually homeboys and they love each other. They've said that so many times. In
Mhm.
our dynamic in America, it's actually the opposite. White people have a severe distaste and when we think about hatred, I think sometimes people think about hatred in the sense that, oh, I hate you. A lot of times when people hate, it's because they really hate themselves, you know? It's not even like a hating of, oh, I hate you, I'm mad at you. It's
Yes.
or I don't know myself, I hate myself, and because I hate myself, who can I lash out at and who can I make feel bad about themselves because I feel bad about myself. And I think that's something, the psychological aspects of that, or something that really escaped me. But when I think about the fact that I'm just bearing a fact to you, and it would be as if I go into the movie and I'm like, no, Jonathan Majors and and Michael B. Jordan, they really are angry. And it's like, no, Liz, come on, this is a movie. And I'm fighting you, Trina. Like, no, no, no. Don't you see how they're looking at each other? They hate each other like this.
Yeah.
No, they don't. They're friends in real life. That's what we're battling. We're battling where we're like, these are the facts. This is what's happened to Black folk in America. This is slavery. This is segregation. This is the impact. This is what has happened by law. You did not want Black people to have rights. You said, okay, you don't want to be a slave. Now you have to live in a segregated area. I don't want you among me. And since you're not, I don't own you. Now I'm going to disenfranchise you. You can't vote. You can't live near me. You can't get a job. If you do get a job, I'm not going to pay you. If you do get paid, you're not going to get paid the same amount. I'm going to do everything in my power to destroy your ability to be and actually function because you don't want me to own you. And I think that's what gets escaped. It's almost like, well, all this just happened by accident. Nothing this nefarious, nothing this destructive, nothing this repulsive and disgusting happens by accident. It's very purposeful. And I think I taught American history, I taught 8th grade history. And a part of what also is frustrating for me is, as a history teacher, as American literature teacher, I've seen as a college professor what's in the textbooks. And the textbooks they were jolly in the fields, working and, whistling along. And they were treated very fairly well, considering they came from a hostile jungle. We civilized them, gave them a chance to pull themselves up by their bootstraps, and they went on to get freedom and live the American dream. This is wonderful. This is in textbook. So when you have somebody that is attempting to give people like that's actually not what was happening, it becomes this cognitive dissonance where it's like, Liz, for real, they're friends in real life. Like Jonathan Major doesn't hate Michael B. Jordan. I'm like, no, I saw them punching each other. It's like I'm deluded because I'm looking at something that is literally a fantasy, and I refuse to let that go. And that's what's happening. We have an American society, generation after generation after generation, that has been told a story, a narrative that is a myth, and they refuse to let it go because it speaks to the heart of who they are and what they are, and they don't like it. They don't want to come to grips with it. They don't want to see it. They don't want to acknowledge it. All they want to say is, let's start from today. And we all know in any kind of relationship, it's abusive. If someone tells you forget the past, let's start from today, that is impossible because you have to reconcile the past so I can trust you and know that we'll move forward. And I won't hold negative feelings against you if you just admit what's happened. And we all know when we think about a relationship, if someone says, hey, I'm sincere, I messed up and I'm going to change moving forward. Well, these are the things you need to change. And this is what it would take for you to make me whole. And then you have to check in with me and I need to see that you're actually committed. If someone hasn't done that, typically most of us will say, well, there's no hope for this relationship. Because if you haven't reconciled with what you've done wrong and you're not even admitting it, then I can't trust you. And what Black America and other people of color and other people that have been marginalized, decimated, genocide, rape, kill, maim, everything that you could think of, are being asked to say, well, I did all that up until yesterday, but trust me today, and I do have your best interest in mind. And that is just not true.
Thank you. Oh, wow. You dropped so many truth bombs. Shahana, Gary, you want to jump in and further the conversation? I have a million things going through my head after that, but I really do. So, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. A million things going on in my head. And so very hard hitting is not even the word because the truth behind it The truth that just goes unacknowledged because it makes a handful of people uncomfortable. It's like white children, and I don't live in a white country, and but we've been colonies of a white nation, right? I'm from India. I'm in Mumbai, and we were colonized for 250 years, and we were known as natives. Of course, we are natives. We are from this land, so of course we are natives of this land. Till the foreigners came in, but apparently native was derogatory. I don't know why. But that apart, it's almost like history can't be taught in reality in the way it really happened because a handful of people must be kept comfortable. What does that mean? White
Mhm.
children can't learn about us, about India, about Africa, because it will make them uncomfortable. But the Indian children, African children could go through it.
Mhm.
The,
Mhm.
the Canadian natives, the first people, could go through it. They were killed for not attending Christian schools.
Mhm.
We were the savages, the heathens, the faithless, the I don't know what else. But so the whole thing, the construct that has come up today, and I'm sorry to say and admit that India is part of that construct, not only from having been colonized, but we, from thousands of years prior to colonization, there is a caste system in India, which is inherently supremacist, divisive, and disenfranchises those that don't belong to the so called upper castes. And this toxicity has been carried over across the oceans to countries like the US and the UK, where the Indians have gone to work in companies like Google and Cisco. If you all have read anything about what has happened in Google, someone from the upper caste stopped someone from the lower caste, both from India, from discussing this in Google at Google. And Google allowed it. Why? What were they even thinking of? So, all of this intertwined power plays, supremacy, that is playing out in today's world. And I'm an idealist, I'm also hopeful. So I also feel that this power play and the supremacy is also kind of at their in their death throes, in their death throes, because these conversations that we are having in these pods are cropping up more and more and more and more from the edges. They are now entering the center, the so-called center, okay, of a completely networked, completely interconnected world. I mean, where is the center? Don't ask me. But the West created the center and the periphery. And now these conversations are, how should I say, intruding in their center, are making the center mighty uncomfortable and expanding the edges of that center till the periphery and the center blends together, until the periphery and the edges and the center becomes one. And till then, maybe I won't be alive, maybe none of us will, but we are part of that conversation of melting, of deconstructing and destroying that center that has been so very dear to the colonial nations, where
Mhm.
everything else was margin, everything else was just for resourcification to energize that center.
Mhm. Yes,
Yeah, yeah.
absolutely. Um, I think one of the things that I really want to point out is I love that center part. We are they're panicking, and when they panic, they create wars. When they panic, they create scarcity to the point where people are clawing for survival and then become desperate, and they use the desperation against us in order to make us compliant It's the same thing they do. They've done it all over the world. And like you said, there's just a few. And I think that people are finally waking up to realize it is just a few. And when we start to empower ourselves and we start to unite and have these conversations like we're having and bringing the awareness, we start to chip away at their power in such a big way. It seems small, but the book that you wrote, you know, the things that we do daily, even on LinkedIn, the things that we do in our private lives, it is a type of defiance that cannot be held back. And the hegemony has to change, has to. And people, the more people who have their grand awakening and just do it, just do it. Make the uncomfortable decision for a while, you know? Stop supporting it for a while. And we can see radical change because that's how we've gotten this far. That's how gotten this far.
And just another point, what you said, Trina, about
Mhm.
chipping away at the center and this whole thing collapsing, and what Elizabeth said a while back about this fantasy. It's almost like we've always seen through the fantasy, right?
Mhm.
It's like this adolescent boy's dream of becoming a Superman. So that's the fantasy, and we've seen through that. But it's also the parts of the white world are seeing their own fantasy,
Mhm.
and because once you pierce that veil of illusion, delusion, fantasy, you can no longer weave it back. The so-called illusion cannot be spun again because the web is torn. There are just too many holes in the web now, and you can
Mhm.
see through the brokenness. You can see through the brokenness in the Western world. When I say Western, I'm talking of a few specific, you know, the colonial nations, because there is global South also in the West, residing within the West. And the fantasy and this web is now torn. And the brokenness underneath is so very visible that there is a scrambling to hide it, especially post COVID. But it is no longer going to be hidden. And that
Yeah.
makes conversations like these not only so much more powerful but and necessary, but it's almost like we are ringing the death knell. And I do believe we are.
Mm.
Ever hopeful idealist that I am.
Mm. Mm.
Trina, I'd love to chip in if I may, because this for me, Elizabeth, abuse, letting go, discomfort, like this is such a felt experience, right? We're so used to not feeling in the West, right? Colonialism in itself has been about suppressing feeling, right? The overarching thing is, how do I dehumanize other humans so they cannot feel? Because I'm hurting so much inside that I don't want you to feel, because otherwise then I'll have to feel. Like, it all comes
Mm.
back to this depth of feeling for me. And when I just this it is a harrowing conversation and also a beautiful potential conversation that we're having, because I'm just going to finish up. I don't want to take up much space 'cause I'm just loving being with you, and I want to learn and listen, and I don't want to be the white guy that takes up too much space. But what I do want to share is some very real life examples. Okay, right now in corporate Europe, the incredible difficulty for me to get white human beings to look beyond gender for their DEI initiatives. It is so damn impossible for me as a white man to get my peers to look beyond gender. Like, that's how terrified people are of,
Mm.
like, not being in control, but not being in
Mm.
control of what's outside of them, of having
Mm.
to feel what's inside of them.
Mm.
And
Yes.
I don't know, I'm curious how we create the conditions. Because for me, there's something about in the West, we don't have time. Too many people are being slayed. Too many people are still oppressed to wait and meet people where they're at. Like, I can't wait for people to be met where they're at. We need to, like, get beyond that. I don't know if it's shock and awe. I don't know what has to happen. But in the West, we need more than just meeting people where they're at. And I'm on a mission in my own small baby way to try and get beyond meeting people. So, yeah, I just wanted to bring to life some real life examples in corporate Western world as to like, even if we are conscious, even if we do want to make a difference, that hegemony is so entrenched. They're so afraid of feeling. And I want to emphasize feeling. It's not about money. It's not about any of that. Like we print money at will, right? It's not about money. It's about desire and want and will. And I'm curious what it's going to take. Like how much pain do those people have to feel before we see change? I don't know. But I'll throw it back into the space and thank you.
Elizabeth, you want to?
I think that's such a good point because it isn't necessarily money. When you think about people that are broken inside, they don't know who they are. They have a lot of trauma. Money is just, it could be pebbles, it could be marbles, it could be drugs, it could be sex, it could be depravity. When we think about the destructive nature of whiteness everywhere it goes, when we think about colonialism and imperialism, has raped, killed, murdered, maimed, tortured. I mean, anything that you could think of. If you think about the depravity of raping so much that somebody got to have 15 children and then you sell them all. Or if you think about the fact that you raping somebody in front of their, if we think about this, it's human trafficking. And this idea that this was happening not a million years ago in dinosaur days. This was happening 5 generations ago. So you have people that their great-great-grandparents were enslaved. Paul Robeson, when you think about people that are well-known, Paul Robeson, a great opera singer. I just posted on LinkedIn, actually, a video of his. He said his father was a slave. So he was born in the late 1800s, and we can think about the idea that this is not something that is so far in the past to the point where people have not had great grandparents or grandparents that were a generation out of slavery. So all of this destruction, it for me, I feel like there is a feeling, but it's also the fact that there's something so deep seated and so deep rooted that has to be addressed, and that whatever that hurt and pain is has to be uprooted and unrooted and laid bare. And I think for a lot of people that are victims of abuse, it thrives in silence. It thrives in the idea of, I can't shame the abuser. I can't tell the abuser what's going on. These kind of conversations can't happen because then the abuse will get worse. I don't have anywhere to go. So if you think about someone that's in an abusive situation, when we go back to the history of American chattel slavery, it went from 1600s up until 1865, quote unquote, emancipation, another 150 years of segregation and prison industrial complex, starting with the chain gangs and everything else, 13th Amendment, which really, in a sense, made it worse. Because now I don't got to treat you well. I don't own you. You're not $1,000. You're nothing to me. I can just go get another one of you and plant drugs on them or give them. And when people say police don't do stuff like that, I've seen police do stuff. People that don't have regular contact with the police will always say police don't do that. But I'm like, I've seen police with my own eyes do things. I know people that said the police frisked me and stole money. I remember, never forget one guy, he said, the police frisked me and they stole $20. And it was just the insult of, how dare you, like $20? What? But they do it because they can. So we've had this history of 400 years of all this depravity coming from one small group of people that felt like they could. And we don't have the psychiatric knowledge or power to really figure out why they're doing this. All we know is that it's happening. And when you're getting, Garry, pushback from people in your space that are saying, well, we can talk about white women because we want women to get in here. And we know that white women have typically been the recipients of most of these DEI initiatives because white women have been the handmaiden and the ones that have helped with this. So obviously it would be fine. They wouldn't have any issue with getting white women in there, because if we think about the white women that were slave owners and owned enslaved Africans, 40% of them did. They were not these just in the house, didn't know what was going on. Who as a wife can say they don't know what their husband's doing? You have no idea. You're clueless. Even me as a wife, if my husband was doing something, there's no way I didn't say, that doesn't look right. Something does not add up. As a wife, you're not just sitting there, la, la, la. You don't know what your husband's doing. Children are popping up. They're mixed 15, 20 kids are showing up and they all look white. And you're like, oh, how did that happen? It did not. The Confederate women of America were the ones that raised all the money to put up the Confederate statues that we see all around America. They lobbied for textbook writers to include that it was the lost cause. So it makes perfect sense. When we think about the microaggressions, a lot of those come from white women. So the idea that white men would be okay with having white women in these spaces, of course they would, because white women are not going to push back. White women are clapping. I got on a panel the other day and literally went off on every white woman on that panel. How dare you clap that you're 10% of Fortune 500 CEOs? You should go home and tell off your brother, your daddy, your son, your nephew, and your cousin, because you're 50% of the population. I don't have any power because none of those people in my social circle, but you mean to tell me you're clapping that you're 10% of Fortune 500 leaders and you are 50% of the population? You should be ashamed of yourself for clapping, because they have literally become the arm of white cisgender men that are the ones perpetrating it, and the white women are right beside them like, okay, well, at least we get a little piece of the pie. We might not get all, but we get our little portion. And then they go out and perpetrate with their spouse, partner, brother, daddy. I always feel as though it's really disingenuous, because this idea that everyone is not knowing what's going on and everyone's so clueless. You're going into a space. If as a white man you went into a space and every space you went into, everyone was black, you would start to say, well, that they don't hire no white people in none of these organizations. I know white people are 80% of the population. How come every time I go in an organization, I'm the only white guy? Any normal human being would say that, but you know what they tell us? I don't see color. That is a damn lie. Because if you go into any organization across any corporate spaces, everywhere you go, only people you saw was black people, and we're only 14% of the population, or even half of the people were black, you would start to say, this is kind of weird. How come half the people in here are black and I'm like one of only 2 or 3 white people? You would start to feel some type of way. And it boggles my mind that all white people are walking around oblivious, skip to Malou in a daze, and not wondering why there are no black folk, no brown folk, no other folk that don't look like them. You mean to tell me everyone is just sitting here confused? And the idea, I'm just on a rampage now because I'm just getting irritated with the whole concept of that. The idea that we have to, as DEI practitioners, somebody has to go into your organization and say, hey, let's do a survey and let's do a study to figure out how we can hire fairly and pay. That sounds, it's the most dumbest thing I've ever heard of. You need somebody to teach you how to make things fair for everybody. And then when you do go in as the DEI practitioner, I'm not one, but I keep hearing I'm getting pushback. Pushback about what? About hiring qualified people? There's a pipeline issue. They're not great. All the stats say that is not true. So you're literally lying. And that's the part that makes me mad. This has become a multi-billion-dollar business for people to go in that are actually replicas of the people that are doing the most harm. And they're going to the other person that's doing harm and saying, what do we do about it? And the other person saying, I don't know, do a study, or that's not happening, or that's not true, or we got a pipeline issue. When all that needs to happen is people need to hire people respectfully and fairly and pay them what they deserve. And I don't even understand. And I know why people just don't want to do it. They don't want to give up their seat, because if you always had a 5-yard head start everywhere you went, every single thing you did, you had a head start. I was thinking about this morning. I said, remind my daughter when she was playing soccer, and every child got a participation trophy. It didn't matter if you were good, bad. My daughter sucked. She's 24 now, but when she was 5, she played soccer. And she sucked. They would be like, "Go, Emily," and she would score a goal, and that would be her one goal for the game. So she got a participation trophy just like everyone else. Now, if Emily goes to Major League Soccer and tries to play against the Olympic team, is Emily going to win? No, she would not, because she got participation trophy. But if you were the person, if you told her, hey, you can just go there and everybody will just let you score, just like they did when you were 5 and playing soccer, and everyone got participation trophy, who wouldn't want that? Who wouldn't be like, I get to go to the Olympics and play with all those people, and they'll just clear the path and let me score, and I'll get an Olympic gold medal just like everybody else? Of course she would say she would want it. And that's what's happening. Everybody wants to continue to take advantage and get unfair. And then they're saying, no, but I scored, I'm an Olympic, but that would be like my daughter saying that I'm an Olympic soccer player just like everyone else. No, you're not. You sucked. So it's this idea of you don't want to admit that you suck. You don't want to admit that you don't. Just say that you don't like competition. Just say that you don't want it to be fair, and be honest. Stop saying you can't find people. It's annoying.
That is absolutely true. Thank you, Elizabeth. I know I want to talk so much more, but
it's like I go on a rampage sometimes when I think about how silly that is.
No, well, it's kind of infuriating, the cognitive dissonance of the people, and you wonder what it is. I have my theories. I've brought them up. It could be genetic. It could be there's some, yeah.
I mean, we have epigenetic trauma, so it would stand to reason.
Of course, and I think Europeans who went through the medieval times have their own epigenetic issues, because it was a brutal and ruthless time.
Yeah.
And I sometimes wonder what would have happened if they would have stayed where they were.
They should have stayed where they were. What were they doing there? Oh, you guys were doing slavery too. How do you know? You shouldn't have been there. And that's another thing that irritates me. It's like you came to somebody's country, India, Africa, everywhere you went. Well, y'all were doing such and such, so we came in to right the right. No, you didn't, sir. You came there and just caused a whole bunch of commotion, and we're supposed to be okay with that and say,
and they actually caused more commotion than it actually was, because the concept of slavery is so much different around the world than it was with chattel slavery.
Don't tell them that, because they'll get mad.
I know. They immediately go to, well, you had slaves. Well, yeah, but they also married them.
That's the Trump card. You had slavery too.
Yeah, and integrated them into their society and culture and built their armies with them. They became a part of the tribe. They didn't get beaten, emasculated, raped. It wasn't like that. I'm not saying it wasn't like that sometimes, but I'm just saying.
Yes.
Yeah. So
different concept.
Yeah, it's a different concept altogether, but that's what hegemony does. Hegemony is about gaslighting. Hegemony is about blatant lies. Hegemony is about staying in power and also projecting the fear of what could happen if other got equality. And that's where we need to end this. We need to stop. They need to stop projecting their concepts of ideas onto other groups who have no history of that type of brutality.
If we were like them, they wouldn't even exist. If we were
that's what I always say.
If we were like them, well, the fact of the matter is the reason we're in these situations because we're very kind. Yeah, unfortunately, even though they say we're savage and barbarian, everywhere they went, they were welcomed, or they wouldn't have been able to do what they did. And that's part of the problem too. We actually have always been kind. There's no history of Indian people mass murdering white people. There's no history of African. We raping when they came to Africa. Did they get raped when they went to India? Did they get killed when they went to India or Africa? No, we were like, hey, we got some resources here. We can share some with you. And what did they do? Christopher Columbus. The Indians are bringing gold. I wonder where the mines are. They're bringing such a little bit. They seem so docile. They would be easy to conquer. Let me rape this 14-year-old. Not a relationship, not a love affair like Sally Hemings and Thomas Jefferson. That's called molestation, pedophilia, and rape. And this all goes back to people just wanting to do whatever they want with no consequences, no fear of retribution, because it's this idea of whatever I'm doing because of my skin, I have free reign and everyone else is at my dominance. And that is the problem. And that continues up until today, always in other countries' business, but everything is falling apart in your household. You cannot as a regular normal human being, me, if my household is in disarray, I'm not coming to your house, Trina, to tell you how to run your house, because I need to get my own house together first. And that's another part of colonialism and imperialism that is super irritating. It's like constantly wanting to dominate and tell other people what to do, and you don't even have your own stuff together.
Well, they know they don't have their own stuff together. It's all about objectification for production and profit, and that's what it's always been about. So, gosh, that went by so fast.
Yeah, because I went on a rampage. I think Garry got me mad when he said he was getting pushback.
This was the highlight.
Pushback. I'm like, I got the answer for why you're getting pushback.
Thank you, Liz.
Yeah, they want to get people in there to help them with their chaos.
Well, the thing is we're here on this live. We're here on Hegemony Revealed to speak truth to power. And so you did that beautifully. You did that eloquently. You did that powerfully. So yeah, that's why we had you on the podcast. So no apologies. And thank you.
Trina, they would never ask me back. I just went on a.
No, that's not true. That's not true.
Not true at all.
Not at all. We'd love to have you back. Whenever you want to get on, you let me know, and we'll have you on, because usually it's the three of us. It's always exciting to get another perspective, to get another energy in there.
Yeah, me too, because I think this is what it's about. And I think Sahana said it so well, this idea that these conversations have been being had in little pockets.
Mm-hmm.
2 years ago, I got a lot of pushback because I was posting about Jamaican history and India and indigenous folk and globally Caribbean, and people were like, you're diluting Black History Month. This year, when I posted about the hip hop and Indian dance mashups and the Panamanian culture, the Afro-Mexican, the Afro-Indigenous cultures all over, people loved it, because I think people are starting to wake up to the idea of this global majority stronger together, and how we as a global majority, the internet, I think, has opened up our eyes in a lot of ways, especially since the pandemic actually kept going. 2020 people really weren't ready to hear this idea that if I support Sahana, I'm supporting me. If I support this woman in the UK, I'm supporting myself. If I support indigenous folk in Brazil or in Colombia or Mexico or anywhere else that we are, because we're everywhere, then we are emboldening each other. And I think this is the final year. So like Sahana said, I'm a little bit more hopeful in that we as a community are coming together and trying to find solutions, not necessarily looking from the outside in. And it's great to have allies and people like Garry that are disrupting and want to go in those spaces. But I also feel like it's really important for us to have conversations that empower us, to let us know that this is not just an American thing. This is not just a Europe thing. This is happening all over the world. And if we collectively join our voices together, it will become a cacophony that they will not be able to stand. And one thing narcissistic, abusive person hate is for a mirror to be held in their face. And they have to reckon with themselves. Look in the mirror. This is what you are. And that's why the death throes and the, oh my God, those gasps were coming, because a narcissistic person, once you've taken that mask off, they go ballistic. And I want them to go ballistic, because being ballistic means that now you're facing the truth and you have to, and we're all looking at you. Let that shame come to the surface. You need to be ashamed, because what you've done, when we think about Sahana saying what makes them feel bad, this is not for children to feel bad. As an educator, I don't think any educator that is worth their salt would ever go into a classroom and want a white child or any other child to feel bad. But the fact of the matter is, history is ugly. When I grew up in UK, we learned about Nazi Germany because we walked past bomb shelters and other things in London that we knew were happening. So they had to tell us, this is why we have these bomb shelters here. So the idea that we're not informing children of what has happened, there is a lot of truth. It's this idea that's why in Germany they have the monuments, and you can't say there wasn't a Holocaust, because they don't want it to happen again. We're going to say slavery didn't happen, that it was happy.
Yeah, Germany actually has been doing a very good job as far as retribution and talking about the history of their country. And I think that's why they have taken off as a country culturally. They still have issues with neo-Nazis. I lived in Germany and I was one township away from a neo-Nazi headquarters. So yeah, it's still there. But the more that we expose these things, the better. Anyways, we have to wrap up now, because I've already sent a message to my client. I'm running late. I'll be
I'm sorry.
I'm so
Liz went
sorry.
on a rampage.
I usually give a little bit more space in between my clients, but this time I'm running late, and
I think Shahana should wrap up because I'm sweating.
Yes, Shahana, please wrap it up.
Oh, this is amazing, amazing, amazing. And you know what all of you said, and especially Elizabeth, Trina, you said, this hegemony is finally cracking. And what we are seeing, and it's one of my favorite lines, that we've been run for centuries, at least 3, 4, 5 centuries, by a single monomyth, a monomyth fantasized by a handful of white European men running the show who dreamed of running this world their way. But now that monomyth is shattering, and all the terms that were used as gaslighting, like meritocracy and capitalism and neoliberalism, what was liberal about it, we still don't know, right? And all of those terms that have been successfully used to gaslight generations and keep hidden the ugliness that actually infused this entire power play on the surface is now falling apart. And we can literally see for ourselves that a very diverse, very pluriversal planet of humans and beyond humans and more than humans cannot be run by one single toxic myth. And that myth is gone, shattered. And we are creating the new stories together. It's no longer Africa and India and Caribbean. It is us together creating the stories.
All right. Okay. Thank you, everybody. Let's log off. Have a great rest of your day. Thank you again, Elizabeth. And like I said, 3 lucky people on this live are going to get a copy of her book. So it is random. So no favorites. So we just gonna close our eyes, keep the name. And so if you commented, you're probably gonna get a copy. So thank you again, everyone, and have a good rest of your day.
Bye. Bye.
Good to see you all.